This is a full story. Puppy wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. Serena was Rocky's first love. In the 5th year of my marriage to Rockey, she was getting a divorce and returned to the country. From the day she came back, Rocky's heart became unsettled. To be honest, after hanging up the phone, I just felt a little upset. The thought of divorce wasn't that strong yet, until I suddenly fainted from low blood sugar. At that time, it was just me and Jack, who had just returned from school. I passed out for about 10 minutes, woken up by his loud gaming. Jack only glanced at me once before going back to his game. I felt awful, and with all my strength, I asked him for help. "Jack, can you get mommy a piece of chocolate?" He reluctantly stood up, holding his tablet, but he bypassed me and left the room directly. When the door slammed shut at that moment, I suddenly understood everything. Jack was born because Serena got married, and Rockey, drunk and reckless, slept with me. I wasn't planning to keep the baby. The doctor didn't recommend it either, given how much Rockey drank that night. But he proposed to me, begging me to keep the child. I had loved him for so many years, how could I refuse? So, we got married, and I gave birth. But now, the child I carried for 10 months, the one I raised with my own hands, had become so cold and selfish that it was chilling. So, why should I continue to compromise in a marriage like this for him? Rockey still came home late at night. I hadn't slept, waiting for him. He seemed to be in a good mood. He took a small box from his pocket and handed it to me. "See if you like it." I opened it. It was a bracelet. In Serena's photos today, there was a flashy necklace. If I guessed right, this simple bracelet was a free gift with the necklace. But I didn't even feel sad anymore. I even smiled at him. "It's pretty." Rockey seemed relieved. "Glad you like it." When he came out of the shower, he handed me his towel as usual. I took it, as always. But halfway through drying his hair, I stopped. "Rockey," I called his name softly. He didn't move, but he raised his hand to hold my arm. "What? You want some?" I laughed wryly. Serena had been back for 5 months, and Rockey and I hadn't been intimate in just as long. When I didn't respond, he turned, pulling me into his arms. "Haley." His eyes began to smolder, and he lowered his head to kiss me, but I pushed him away. "Rockey." I smiled at him calmly, my words steady and composed. "Let's get a divorce." "Divorce?" He was clearly surprised. "Yes, divorce." I pulled away from his embrace, stepping back and standing firm. "Because of Serena?" Rockey frowned, annoyed. "You know she's going through a divorce. I'm just helping her out." His eyes landed on my left hand. The wedding ring was gone, leaving a faint mark. "Haley, you're a mother now. Why are you still acting so childish?" I turned and walked out. "The divorce papers are on your desk in the study. As for the division of assets, I only want what I'm entitled to. If you have no objections, please sign them quickly." "What about Jack?" Rockey's voice was filled with anger. "Don't forget, he's my son." I gripped the door handle, turned back, and smiled at him. "Yes, he's Rockey's flesh and blood, so I won't fight you for him." "Haley." Rockey's face turned dark. "What are you doing this for? Because I've been neglecting you lately? I told you, Serena is getting a divorce. I'm just helping with her case. And Jack is only 5. He can't grow up without his mother's care." Rockey picked up his clothes with a cold expression. "I'll pretend this is just a tantrum. I'm staying at the company apartment for a few days. Haley, when you've thought it through and realize your mistake, come find me." The next afternoon, Rockey received a call from the maid at the marital home. Haley had packed up all her things and left. The woman who always doted on Jack and took care of him personally, for the first time, didn't send him to school herself. Rockey couldn't help but recall the divorce papers Haley had prepared. It was written clearly in black and white that she didn't want custody of Jack. This shocked Rockey. Haley had a difficult labor when giving birth. Jack was put in an incubator right after being born. After her confinement period, she started caring for him herself. For 5 years, she had never been away from Jack for a single day. So, Rockey couldn't believe Haley would give up their child. He figured this big show she was putting on was just because she was jealous of Serena. And the reason for her jealousy, of course, was because Haley was madly in love with him. Rockey knew she had had a crush on him for years. Back when he and Serena were together, she was just an insignificant girl. After he and Serena broke up due to a misunderstanding, Haley reappeared in his life, all grown up and beautiful. It's hard to say whether that drunken night was really an accident, or if he was already a little tempted by her. In the 5 years since their marriage, they had lived in harmony as a couple. Until Serena returned. Yes, he had neglected Haley a bit in recent months. But still, Haley couldn't just bring up divorce so casually. So, he decided to teach her a lesson. The maid called again. "Mr. Rockey, Madam has called a car and says she's moving out." Rockey silently lit a cigarette. He lowered his gaze to the wedding ring on his finger. After a long pause, he said coldly, Let her go. Tell her once she steps out, she shouldn't expect to come back. I arrived an hour early to pick up Jack. I bought him all the toys he wanted, all the junk food he wanted to eat, which I usually didn't allow him to have. But Jack didn't seem very happy. He frowned and disdainfully said, "Are you scared because you know Dad is going to marry Aunt Serena? It's too late to try to please me now." He threw the toys one by one onto the ground, and then stepped on them. He threw all the food into the trash can. Then, looking pleased, he said to me, "If you dare hit me, I'll tell Dad right away." I looked at his face, which was exactly like Rocky's. Deep down, I didn't feel any reluctance at all. "Jack." I touched his face one last time. "I won't bother you anymore. Let's say a complete goodbye today and never meet again." "What do you mean?" Jack looked a bit dazed and instinctively reached out to pull me, but I avoided him and smiled at him. "It means I don't want you anymore." Jack was completely stunned. After a moment, a hint of grievance flashed in his eyes, but then he shot me a fierce glare. "Who wants you? Aunt Serena is 100 times better than you." "Well, then let her be your mom." I raised an eyebrow nonchalantly. "Jack, good luck." I booked a plane ticket to Hong Kong. I happily spent half a month with my best friend from school, until Rocky's call came through to my friend. "Haley, Jack is sick and he's crying for you." I thought for a moment and calmly replied, "It's normal for kids to get sick during seasonal changes. Rockey has a family doctor and a private hospital. They will take good care of him." Rockey said nothing and hung up the phone. My friend looked a bit distressed and asked, "Haley, do you really not want the child anymore?" She knew how much effort I had put into Jack. I nodded. "Yeah, I don't want him anymore." "What about Rockey? Do you still like him?" In the past, just hearing Rocky's name would make my heart race uncontrollably, but now, there was not a single ripple. "I don't like him anymore. It's true, I don't like him anymore." My friend couldn't help but cheer. "Haley, we must celebrate. Tonight, we'll drink until we drop." My first time with Rockey was influenced by alcohol. Back then, I was sober, and Rockey was the one who was drunk. This time, I got completely wasted. The man in front of me, however, was always calm and restrained. Even when he supported me, he did it with gentlemanly grace. My friend hesitated for a long time before approaching. "Peter, can you please take Haley home?" Peter didn't reply but helped me, almost collapsing, to sit on the sofa. "The driver is for you too. I'll drive back myself." "Peter, you really don't care about Haley anymore?" Peter's expression was indifferent. "I told you 5 years ago, her matters have nothing to do with me anymore." I suddenly laughed silently. Yes, at that time, Rockey had drunkenly forced himself on me. Peter insisted on calling the police, but I was so infatuated. I ended up choosing to marry him. Peter was my childhood friend. We grew up together. Because of that incident with Rockey, he was utterly disappointed in me and completely severed contact. I never expected to run into him tonight. I had heard he had been abroad all these years and had never returned. Who knew we would meet in a bar in Hong Kong? I concealed the embarrassment in my heart and softly called out to my friend, "Lon Lon, let him go. I can go back by myself." Peter said nothing and turned to leave. But when my friend helped me out of the bar, his Bentley was parked by the roadside with its hazard lights on. Peter leaned against the car, smoking, with cigarette butts scattered all around him. "Haley." He smiled, but that smile carried an indescribable bitterness. "I must owe you from my last life." He helped me into the car and arranged for the driver to take my friend home. When the car arrived at the hotel where I was staying, Peter parked, unbuckled his seatbelt, and then leaned over, gripping my chin and kissing me. I felt dazed. Perhaps the alcohol was making my head spin. I even wrapped my arms around his neck, responding to his kiss. "Haley." Peter's kiss deepened gradually. His fingers ran through my long hair, holding the back of my head, forcing me to comply with him. Just when I was about to lose my breath, he ended the deep kiss. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead against mine. "Do you want this?" I suddenly thought of the chat screenshot I received a month ago, sent by Rockey to Serena. "I want you. I want to do it again." At that time, I was worried about Jack and trapped in deep pain and confusion. But now, I didn't care about anything anymore. I directly tilted my face up to kiss him, tightening my grip around his neck. "Peter, let's do it." But Peter held my shoulders and gently pushed me away. In the flickering light, his handsome brows were incredibly serious and focused. "Haley, I have a condition." "What condition?" "I'm a very traditional man." Peter smiled slightly as he lowered his eyes, his fingers tightening around my shoulders. "If we do it, you have to be responsible for me." When he said that, I sobered up quite a bit. Responsibility. Those two words were too heavy, and they directly struck at an old wound in my heart. When Rockey proposed to me back then, it was also the so-called responsibility after drunkenness. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Peter chuckled softly. Haley. He brushed aside the messy hair on my forehead and looked deeply into my eyes. If you don't want to take responsibility, don't provoke me. You know I'm not that kind of man. He gently pushed me away and got out of the car. Then he opened the car door for me. Come on, I'll take you back to your room. He stood there, tall yet thin, with the light behind him. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but I felt inexplicably sad. Peter took me to my room, and after watching me go in, he left directly. I leaned against the door for a long time, not moving at all. I didn't know if it was the alcohol making me uncomfortable, or if it was the last look Peter gave me. When he left, his last sentence was, Haley, my flight is at 3 o'clock tonight. I think I'll never come back again. Suddenly, my phone rang loudly, pulling my thoughts back abruptly. The incoming number seemed familiar, but I couldn't recall it for a moment. I answered the call, only to hear Rockey's other secretary's voice. Madam. The secretary sounded very respectful and cautious. It's like this, mister. Rockey drank too much tonight, and he just vomited. The servants made a hangover soup he doesn't want to drink. He says it tastes wrong. Madam, could you come back? I directly interrupted him. If he doesn't want to drink the hangover soup, then he can take hangover medicine. I'm neither Rockey's servant nor a doctor. Don't bother me with these things in the future. Oh, and please hurry up with the divorce matters for Mr. Rockey. Madam. The secretary wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Rockey's deep roar. Who told you to call her? Alice, your courage is getting bolder. But Mr. Rockey, shut up. My matters have nothing to do with Haley. If you act on your own again, you can quit. I couldn't be bothered to hear more, and directly hung up the phone. My heart didn't waver at all, and I quickly blocked Secretary Song's number as well. Around 1 in the morning, I inexplicably woke up. I found Peter's account on WeChat. In the 5 years I've been married to Rockey, we hadn't even sent a single holiday greeting to each other. But his avatar was still that one I had used for over a decade. A rough carved little puppet. It was barely recognizable as a little boy's figure. It was the first figure I carved. When I impulsively learned wood carving, I later gave it to him. I stared at that avatar and couldn't help but smile. But as I smiled, tears inexplicably fell. I sent Peter a message on WeChat. Peter, my tooth hurts a lot. It's keeping me awake. The top of the chat box quickly showed he was typing, but no message came through for a long time. Just as I was about to doze off, the WeChat notification sound rang. I bought you some medicine. It'll be delivered soon. I was momentarily stunned and replied, oh. Peter didn't respond again. I clutched my phone but lost all desire to sleep. He didn't send any more messages. About 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I groggily got out of bed and went to open the door. But when the door opened, it wasn't the delivery guy outside. It was Peter, who still looked tired. Peter? I was stunned. He was holding the bag of medicine, and his face showed little expression. Is your tooth still hurting? I nodded blankly. He set the medicine down and turned to wash his hands in the bathroom. Open your mouth, let me have a look. You're not a dentist. Haley, when have you ever dealt with your tooth pain without me? After he said that, both of us were momentarily stunned. We hadn't seen each other in 5 years. Peter's face was slightly cold, but his hands were incredibly gentle. He pressed me onto the sofa, tilted my head back, and opened my mouth. His long fingers skillfully found the wisdom tooth. That often hurt me, but this time, the tooth wasn't swollen or infected. Peter glanced at me, then slowly withdrew his finger. Haley. He took a disinfectant wipe and cleaned each finger one by one, then cradled my face and leaned down. Don't lie to me. I was a bit afraid to look at him, my gaze avoiding his. I'm sorry. No need to say sorry. Peter suddenly smiled. I'm very happy. Peter? I was surprised when I looked at him, but he kissed me. I missed my flight. What should we do now? This time I'm going back to go on a blind date. Now that my wife has flown away, what should we do? What do you think, Haley? Peter's fingers brushed aside the messy hair by my cheek, deepening the kiss gradually. Why don't you compensate me with one? I've been married before and have had a child. It doesn't matter. I'm older, a leftover man. Just being able to marry someone is enough. I couldn't help but laugh. Peter, what leftover man are you? The women chasing you are lining up all the way to France. Peter looked deeply at me. But I'd rather have none than take a chance. Really? I can't tell. You'll see when I do it later. At that moment, I really didn't know that Peter's words were actually a double entendre. Until our first time, he didn't even manage to hold back before carrying me to bed. My knees hurt a bit from rubbing against the sofa. I couldn't help but bite him. Peter, my knees really hurt. His burning palms gripped my waist and turned me over. The position changed to him sitting on the sofa, while I faced away from him, sitting in his embrace. However, the moment I sat down, I felt his abdominal muscles tense up instantly. Even his breathing became heavy and rough. Haley, I'm sorry, I can't hold back anymore. I initially thought that his previous words meant he wanted to see how he would perform in the future, but I never expected that. He was almost 30 and this was his first time. In all those years abroad, he hadn't even dated a girlfriend. Peter, haven't you dated anyone in these years? I lay on the pillow, letting him clean my body. Peter lowered his eyes, his hands moving gently, but he didn't look at me or say a word until he finished showering and came out. He rarely went to the balcony to smoke. When I went to find him, he was holding a cigarette and looking at the vast sky, lost in thought. Peter, I gently hugged his waist from behind. What are you thinking about? Thinking about whether you will take responsibility or just have fun and leave after putting on a dress. I couldn't help but laugh. Am I that bad? He turned to look at me, his eyes tinged with a faint red. You are. Peter, I couldn't smile anymore. My eyes felt sore and swollen. Yes, when he went abroad, I promised him that I would marry him when he came back. But I fell in love with Rockey, and in a muddled confusion, I ended up having that chaotic night with him. Peter, I held him tightly. I will take responsibility for you. Okay. He hugged me tighter and kissed me fiercely. Haley, since you said you would take responsibility, then you have to be responsible to the end. On the 30th day in Hong Kong, Rockey still hadn't signed the divorce agreement. I was tired of waiting, so I directly filed a lawsuit in court. On the day Rockey received the lawsuit, Jack's kindergarten teacher also called me. Jack's mom, Jack has been dozing off in class lately. I see he doesn't seem to be in good spirits, and he's lost some weight. I sighed lightly. Teachers, yeah, you should contact Jack's dad. Jack's mom, could you come to school? It's been a while since we've seen you pick Jack up. I'm sorry, it's not very convenient. Well then, sorry to bother you. As I was about to hang up, I couldn't help myself. Teachers, yeah, when Jack's dad comes to pick him up, could you ask him to pay attention to whether the child is sneaking off to play games on his tablet at night? Jack had indeed pretended to be asleep before, then secretly played games at night. Once, when I caught him, I was so angry that I smashed the tablet. But not long after, it was his birthday, and he received several of the latest tablets. Perhaps fearing I would smash it again, he had restrained himself and didn't dare to play at night anymore. But now that I was gone, Rockey was busy every day with the company and Serena's matters. How could he have the energy or time to take care of him? Although I decided to divorce Rockey, I didn't plan to take Jack. But he was still my biological son, and I didn't want to watch him go down the wrong path. Still, I was just reminding him kindly. Rockey had never felt that disciplining a child was such a tiring thing. Listening to the kindergarten teacher, he specially went to Jack's room at midnight. Sure enough, he caught Jack secretly playing games. In a fit of anger, he smashed the tablet. Jack, who was having a great time, was so furious that he pushed him hard. It seemed that only at that moment did he suddenly understand why Haley had been so angry and disappointed back then. When he bought Jack a new tablet, he also understood why Haley had had such a big fight with him. He couldn't help but slap Jack. Jack was clearly scared, cried for a long time, and honestly went to sleep alone. But Rockey couldn't sleep at all. He thought of the call that Secretary Song made to Haley that night. In fact, he had initially been indifferent and didn't stop it. It was just that Haley's words and attitude had made him furious instantly. Because of a Serena, she acted so willfully. It drove him to the brink. He knew she was just using divorce to blackmail him. Jack was so undisciplined and disobedient. It was all Haley's doing. She just wanted him to know her importance. After finishing a cigarette, Rockey took out his phone. He had actively called her for Jack's sake. Jack was Rockey's flesh and blood, but he was also the child that Haley had fought to give birth to. As a mother, she couldn't just neglect her child. But Rockey never expected that all his contact methods had been blocked by Haley. Even her best friend's phone number could no longer be reached. Suppressing his anger, he walked downstairs. As the night breeze blew in, he still felt a burning anger that wouldn't dissipate. Haley really wanted to play, didn't she? Fine. Rockey smiled angrily. Didn't she want a divorce? Then he would fulfill her wish. He couldn't wait to see what expression Haley would have when he finally signed the divorce agreement. It was all a pretense, and now it had become real. She must regret it deeply. After all, she had loved him so much back then, that when Serena left the country, she immediately appeared in front of him. She lured him into confusion and had that kind of night with him. She had Jack and became Rockey's wife. This time, he would definitely teach Haley a heavy lesson. He would let her know what it meant to regret. When Rocky's lawyer called, Peter was tirelessly clinging to me, trying to prove he wasn't just show. Miss Haley, Mr. Rockey asked me to inform you that the divorce procedures will take place the day after tomorrow in Beijing. When the lawyer's cold yet polite voice came through, I felt the last heavy stone in my heart suddenly drop. Okay, please tell Mr. Rockey that I will return to Beijing on time to handle it. After hanging up the phone, Peter hugged me from behind. Haley, I'll go back with you. But I shook my head. This is a matter between me and Rockey. I can handle it myself. Peter looked worried, but Haley, I'm really worried. I deliberately teased him. What are you worried about? Afraid I can't get divorced? Peter suddenly smiled, but that smile carried an unspeakable fragility. Haley, you have no idea how much it hurt me when I heard you were with Rockey back then. But I would never force you or compel you. You are free. When I said that night for you to take responsibility for me, you didn't have to take it seriously. Even if you don't take responsibility for me, it's fine. I turned around and hugged him, tilting my face up to gently kiss him. But Peter, being with you these days has been so much fun. And just now, you made me feel so good. I gently nibbled on his chin. I will take responsibility for you. Wait for me to come back. Peter's eyes, which were always warm and calm, suddenly seemed to be filled with falling stars. Haley. He rolled over and pinned me down on the bed, his deep and rich voice ringing in my ear. I can make you feel even better. Then, does that mean, for the rest of your life, you won't be able to leave me? I couldn't help but smile, but my whole body felt like it was falling apart. From the collision with him, tears welled up in the corners of my eyes, a layer of moisture blurring my vision. Peter. He lowered his head, kissing me softly and gently. That fierce force gradually morphed into a gentle, soothing caress. I couldn't bear it anymore, sobbing as I cried out, Peter, it hurts so much. It's painful, or is it pleasurable? Haley, tell me. He seemed to be holding back. With all his strength, his muscles tensed in his forearm, sweat dripped from his forehead, falling onto my chest. In the end, I couldn't take it anymore, crying and shaking my head. It's pleasurable. It feels good. Haley, if it feels good, come back early. As my consciousness faded, I felt Peter gently kiss my brow. I'll wait for you in Hong Kong, Haley. On the day I returned to Beijing, I went straight to the lawyer's office. As soon as I got out of the car, I saw Rockey and Serena. Serena had a joyful expression, and eventually, she even cried tears of joy. Then Rockey gently held her. Looking heartbroken, several lawyers stood aside, politely turning their backs. I knew that Serena's divorce case should be settled, so Rockey was also eager to complete our divorce proceedings and become single again. That's good. Serena was happy, Rockey was happy, Jack was happy too, and I, along with Peter, was both comfortable and happy. How could there be such perfect good fortune in this world? Thinking of this, I couldn't help but smile. But as soon as I smiled, Serena saw me. She immediately became unhappy, pulling on Rockey's sleeve, saying something I didn't catch. Rockey turned to look at me, his gaze as cold and distant as possible. Haley, what are you smiling about? Serena's eyes were red, like a little rabbit hiding behind Rockey, looking as if she had suffered a great injustice. Miss Serena is very happy to be divorced, and I'm going to be divorced too. Is that not okay? Rockey was momentarily speechless, his icy demeanor appearing to intensify. Serena hurriedly tugged at his sleeve. Rockey, you and Miss Haley should talk nicely. Don't get angry. There's nothing to talk about. Mr. Rockey, let's process the paperwork quickly. Haley, have I ever reminded you to know when to stop with everything? I raised my eyebrows. What do you mean? If the divorce paperwork is completed, you will have no ties with the Rockey family. And as for Jack, I will never let you see him again. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel a tinge of sadness inside. People can come to a sudden understanding, but the bonds of flesh and blood can't be easily let go of in an instant. But first, I am an independent individual, and then I am Jack's mother. I believe that after a long period of healing, that day will eventually come. Mr. Rockey, actually, if I were to sue you for visitation rights, I would definitely have a chance of winning. But right now, I don't want to waste time on these matters anymore. My bond with Jack is shallow. We dislike each other. If we don't meet, so be it. For some reason, after saying these words, Rockey did not look relieved, but instead appeared somewhat flustered, like a cat that had its tail stepped on. Haley, you really are ruthless. I've never seen a more heartless and cold-blooded mother than you. Jack doesn't like you. I didn't understand before, but now I do. Since you refuse to change, I won't give you another chance. After saying this, he turned and got into the car. not even noticing that Serena hadn't gotten in yet. I didn't care about his words, because I had long ceased to care about him. When the divorce paperwork was nearing completion, Rockey, who was usually decisive, strangely became sticky and hesitant. Haley, this last signature isn't done yet. If you admit your mistake now. Admit what mistake? I signed my name without hesitation, pushing the paper toward Rockey. Is it the mistake of not being tolerant of the mistress? Or the mistake of strictly disciplining the child? Maybe my attitude had thoroughly angered Rockey. His face turned ashen as he picked up the pen and signed. Haley, it's useless to regret. Even if you come back crying and begging me, I won't be soft-hearted. I stood up, carefully collecting all the documents. Mr. Rockey, Jack isn't a bad kid. With strict discipline in the future, he won't go astray. You are his biological father. I believe you will fulfill this responsibility. There's no need for you to worry. Jack will be the best heir of the Rockey family. I smiled. Let's hope so. That would be the best. I secretly returned to Hong Kong, one day earlier than I had agreed with Peter. At that time, Peter was dining at the hotel's buffet restaurant. I called him, pretending to sound down. Peter, Haley, what's wrong? I might not be able to return to Hong Kong on the scheduled time. There was a brief silence on the other end. Did something happen? I'll book a flight right now. Don't worry. We can talk when I get there. No, Peter. I stood by the fountain outside the restaurant, watching through the glass as he put down his knife and fork, quickly walking toward the exit. A sweet pang of emotion spread through my heart. Look outside. Do you see the fountain? Peter stopped in his tracks, turning to look in my direction. I smiled at him, waving my hand vigorously. Peter, I'm over here. The restaurant was bustling with people, but my eyes could only see him. He took his phone and quickly walked toward me. After a few steps, he broke into a run. As the sun set, the scenery was beautiful like a painting. The wind lifted the hem of his coat, revealing his long legs. He smiled at me, his eyes slightly red. So handsome it stole my breath away, making my heart flutter completely, until he tightly wrapped me in his arms, holding me close. Haley, he cradled my face, kissing me somewhat forcefully. At the end of the kiss, he lightly bit my lips. Haley, do you know what? I hate you so much. Peter raised his hand to cover my eyes and lightly kissed the faint bite mark on my lips. But I love you even more, Haley. After registering our marriage, Peter and I temporarily settled in Hong Kong. In the second month after our wedding, Rocky's best friend suddenly called me. Sister-in-law, are you free right now? Is there something going on? Well, sister-in-law, tonight Rockey has invited a few friends to drink, and he is drunk right now. Even after getting drunk, he won't let us take him home. You can call Rocky's family or ask Serena to pick him up. I glanced at the closed bathroom door, gently interrupting. Sister-in-law, Rockey won't allow it. Just now, he suddenly shouted your name. I couldn't help but laugh. If I hadn't divorced him, and if Serena wasn't single again now, he would probably be shouting Serena's name. There are some men who seem to only love the women who have left them forever. I interrupted my friend's words. From now on, just call me Haley, and I've already divorced Rockey, so his matters are no longer my concern. After saying that, I hung up the phone, without waiting for the other person to respond. Just after hanging up, Peter came out of the bathroom. Who called? He asked naturally. I casually replied, an unimportant person, as I reached for a towel to help him dry off. Peter took it from my hands. You don't need to do this. It's not tiring. He quickly dried his hair and smiled at me. You don't need to do anything while I'm around. Yet, every day he patiently helps me blow dry my long hair. Don't you find it annoying? Peter set the dryer to medium heat, gently looking at me. I'm not someone who doesn't appreciate good fortune. Hubby, I couldn't help but turn around, hugging him and looking up for a kiss. Peter leaned down to kiss me, but then restrained himself, saying, wait until your hair is dry, or you'll catch a cold. I pouted at him, but couldn't help but touch his firm abdominal muscles. Only you would still wait at a time like this. After finishing our honeymoon, Peter and I returned to Washington together, except for our closest family and best friends. Nobody in Washington knew about my marriage. We also planned to hold a wedding in Washington. After all, both Peter's and my family are here. I met Rockey again at an elder's birthday banquet. The elder had an average relationship with our family, but a good one with Peter's parents. So Peter took me along to attend. As soon as we entered, Peter was called away by the elder. He had been abroad for a long time, so he was a rare guest. I went to the buffet table to get some small cakes, and when I turned around, I saw Rockey and Jack. The father and son were dressed the same, with the same little faces, which was quite charming. When Jack saw me, his eyes instantly lit up. He even subconsciously called out, "Mommy," and started to come over to me. But after taking 2 steps, he seemed to remember something and awkwardly stopped. Rockey remained expressionless, but his lips were tightly pursed. I nodded at them, suppressing a tinge of sadness in my heart, and was about to turn to leave, but Rockey suddenly walked over. "Haley." He looked at me for a long while before speaking. "Since you're back in Washington, why not stay at Rockey's house? Jack really misses you." I was quite surprised. Back to Rockey's house. Rockey cleared his throat, turned his face away, and spoke with a somewhat unnatural tone. "After all, you are Jack's biological mother. He's not even 6 yet. He really needs his mother. Rockey, we're already divorced." I frowned, preparing to turn away again. "Haley, Serena has already returned to the U.S." Rockey suddenly grabbed my hand and said something inexplicable. "How is that related to me?" I shook off his hand and stepped back. "How is it not related?" He frowned. "Weren't you upset and arguing for a divorce because of Serena? She's gone now, so you should be over it. Now that you're back, I wouldn't mind considering remarrying. After all, you are Jack's biological mother. It's better than an outsider." "Rockey, do I need to be clearer? When I divorced you, I never thought about reconciling." "Haley, I'm giving you a way out. I don't need it." I couldn't hold back anymore. Raising my hand to show him, "Rockey, I'm married." The wedding ring on my ring finger sparkled subtly. Rockey's dark eyes suddenly darkened, but in an instant, he smiled faintly. "Haley, you really don't need to do this. I also said if you want to remarry, I wouldn't mind considering. You say you're married. What about your husband? I don't think, having been married and having a child, you could find a man better than me. Moreover, you love me." He said it so firmly, sure that I once loved him and would forever love him. Sure that deep down, I desperately wanted to remarry him, but was just too shy to speak up. Sure that as long as he beckoned, I would return without pride, but he didn't know. Actually, I didn't know myself. Maybe my so-called feelings for him had already cracked that night when he forced himself on me after drinking. The reason I agreed to marry him later was probably largely because of Jack, just as the final decision to divorce him was also because of Jack. Once, the child was the reason that kidnapped my happiness and freedom, but now, nothing can bind me anymore. "Rockey, although you are a dominant CEO, the world you live in is not a CEO novel." I kindly advised him, "Why not take some time to do a brain CT and check your head?" Just after saying that, I saw Peter walking quickly toward me. He wore a complete set of black business attire, looking dignified and strikingly handsome. His left ring finger also wore a wedding ring, matching mine perfectly. "Haley," he called my name softly. Walking to my side, he naturally intertwined our fingers. The rings on our hands sparkled against each other, which made Rocky's solitary Bulgari wedding ring look absurd. "Hubby, I'm a bit hungry. Can you get me that small cake? I want the mango one." Peter pinched my cheek. "Okay, but eat less sweets, or your teeth will hurt." He turned and took a plate, getting the cake for me. Suddenly, Rockey lost control and knocked the plate off the table. Peter frowned and looked up displeased. "Boss Rockey, what are you doing? You're just the one Haley hired, right? You look quite presentable." Rockey scrutinized him from head to toe, sneering. "Haley is my ex-wife, and she even bore me a child. Are you sure you want to pick up a woman that I discarded?" The air around us suddenly became silent. Although I didn't care about my past, being publicly mocked by Rockey like this was inevitably a bit embarrassing. Peter said nothing, his expression unchanging. He just turned and walked to my side, taking off the watch I had given him, then took off the wedding ring and handed it to me. "Haley, hold this for me. I don't want to get it dirty." I took it in confusion. "Peter, what are you doing?" "Haley, wait for me 5 minutes." He lowered his gaze, rolled up his sleeves slightly, walked up to Rockey, and threw a punch at his face. "I don't like to fight, but Rockey, this is your own doing." As he spoke, another punch landed heavily. "You shouldn't humiliate my wife." Rockey quickly regained his composure and started to fight back. "Your wife? Haley was married to me for 5 years and bore me a child. What does she count as your wife? Should I remind you that you are already divorced? What does divorce matter? You should ask how much Haley loved me." Enough. I felt both heartbroken and angry. I pushed Rockey away and protected Peter. "Rockey, I've long stopped loving you. Do you hear me? What did you say?" Rockey's eyes darkened as he glared at me. "Haley, say that again if you dare." "Rockey, I no longer love you. Maybe I didn't like you anymore. Since the night you forced yourself on me when you were drunk. Then why did you agree to my proposal? Why did you marry me?" Rockey scoffed. "Haley, you just love novelty. You have changed your heart. You don't even want your own child." So how long do you think this man will like you? Why can't I change my heart? Rockey, didn't you change your heart too? You liked Serena, but still got drunk with me. You married me, but slept with Serena. What do you call that? I never slept with Serena. Haley, after we got married, I never had any relationship with Serena. Rockey looked at me and suddenly laughed mockingly. I admit that when Serena came back, I was a bit tempted, but that night, in the end, I thought of you, and I still left her place. I was somewhat surprised, but beyond that, I felt no extra emotion. Whether he progressed with Serena or not, it no longer mattered. Even if he didn't, I would still resolutely divorce him. Enough, Rockey, that's all in the past. I'm married now, and I love my husband very much. I turned to tightly grip Peter's hand. We are happy and loving. You should also look ahead. What about Jack? You don't even want the child you carried for 10 months? Rockey's eyes were red. He looked like a spoiled child, finally realizing fear as he was about to be abandoned. My vision blurred slightly, but I still nodded. Yes, I don't want him. Actually, if that day, Jack had given me a chocolate, I might still have been reluctant to let him go, desperately fighting for his custody. I might have softened my heart again and again, but when Jack went past me and slammed the door, my heart truly died. Rockey turned to pull Jack out with him, but Jack suddenly broke free of his hand, crying loudly. I don't want to go with you. I want mommy. Mommy, I don't want to play games anymore. I know I was wrong. Come back. Jack ran over, tightly grabbing my hand and refusing to let go. I can't deny that I still felt pain, but I also knew I would never forget that day, when I was most helpless. My child turned and left so coldly and selfishly. If I couldn't hold on, would I have just died like that? Jack, go back with your dad. No matter if you're a child or an adult, you have to be responsible for your choices. No, I won't go back, Mommy. I want to be with you. I don't want to be apart. Jack cried and fussed. It seemed he truly felt fear and realized his mistake. Because that day, he was sick in the hospital, and it was Serena who took care of him. But after he fell asleep, he was awakened by the sound of Serena talking on the phone. He heard Serena say, "Why should I take care of someone else's child here, not my own? If it weren't for smoothly getting a divorce, how could I possibly please this annoying child? Jack is stupid. He actually said I'm better to him than Haley. Ridiculous. Which mother doesn't love her own flesh and blood? But if he's a bit stupid, that's good. If I really marry Rockey in the future, he's that stupid, and my child will have one less competitor." Actually, he couldn't really understand. After all, these topics are too profound for a 5-year-old. But he understood one thing. Which mother doesn't love her own flesh and blood? Yes, a biological mother is always better than a stepmother. He seemed to start to understand some truths slowly from that day, and gradually remember my good side. But unfortunately, it was too late. If your dad agrees, I'll go back to see you too. If you miss me, you can come see me. But now, I'm sorry, Jack, I need to start my own life. I touched his little face, saying the same thing as last time we parted. Good luck, Jack. I held a wedding with Peter in Washington. On the wedding day, Rockey and Jack both came, but I didn't let them in. Rockey sent a very heavy gift. Peter confiscated it and had it sent directly to a charity foundation. Jack also prepared a gift for me. It was a handmade item he made himself, along with a card. I kept the card and gave the handmade item to a child who liked it. I heard that day, Rockey's Rolls-Royce parked outside the wedding venue for a long time without leaving. I also heard that after Peter took me home. That Rolls-Royce seemed to follow to our wedding room, but our wedding room was a private villa, so his car couldn't get in. During our honeymoon, in the most passionate moment, Peter suddenly whispered in my ear, "Haley, do you think he'll be so jealous that he'll go crazy outside right now?" I kicked him angrily. What kind of twisted interest is this, Peter? Peter grasped my ankle, slowly pushing it up. He leaned down and kissed me deeply, because during those several thousand days and nights before, I was also this jealous to the point of madness. Peter, I felt a bit heartbroken and couldn't help but hold him tighter, but he gently kissed my ear. But it won't be like that in the future. Haley, from now on, the one who will be jealous is him, Rockey, and I will make him jealous for a lifetime, including the next life. The end. If you like Puppy's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.